Was education part of your world? I mean, you've got a long career in administration and teaching and stuff like that. Was that something you saw when you were at Allegheny and elsewhere?
After I left Allegheny, it became the focus.
Mm-hmm.
I read a book by A.S. Neal called Summerhill, which the light came on because I was anxious to do something to help society, help our world. You know, that was coming out of the late 60s, early 70s, Vietnam, Nixon, that whole thing. And my biology focus was not inspiring to me anymore. So I read that book, and I searched out a teacher's aide job in the Erie City School District, which worked for me. And I then finished at Mercyhurst with elementary ed degree. So since 1971, I would say, it's been a focus for me, yeah.
Jamestown, was that where you started off here?
Nope. I was a elementary teacher in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got the bug to become a building administrator, and I started a search process which landed me in Berlin, Pennsylvania. Southern Pennsylvania, the highest in elevation incorporated township in all of Pennsylvania, top of the mountain.
Wow.
Seven Springs later incorporated, and they lost their status, but Berlin for 4 years, and then I was anxious to move to a larger district that might provide other career opportunities, and started a search from there, and here I am. Debbie's hometown, the Jamestown City School District, 10 different schools, a central administration. So I came to Jamestown as the Love School elementary principal, which is another whole story.
So you became part of Jamestown. That made Doug and Shirley Benson very happy.
Absolutely.
To bring that part of that. And as a result, did you give science seems to be was your initial focus, did it segue into some other areas of interest of yours, or did you find any focus of interest? Not teaching, but just sort of an interest of yours.
Yeah. I was initially a biology major because of my interest in the natural world. I wasn't a hunter way back then, but I like to fish, and I like to be in the woods. I like to build tree shacks and all that stuff. And that's still true today. So most recently, that interest got expressed in my building of a cabin out in the hills of Frewsburg. And that's my avocation, I guess. Any opportunity I have to be out there and putzing around is what I do.
We were talking off camera a little bit about the fact that your son, a gifted tech guy, really helped the Jackson Center in the early days. Was that one of your first exposures to the Jackson Center? It's really through him?
Yeah, and through you.
Yeah.
Those two things. Yeah, and Jason's close friend Jeff Kresge. So there's three different ways I got exposed to or introduced to the Jackson Center. Yeah.
And I know also your father-in-law was interviewed, one of our early interviewees at the center, and that was a thrill for us. And I know that had, I think Doug enjoyed it as well.
Absolutely. Doug was, I guess, not atypical of the World War II veterans. He did not talk about it for years and years and decades. And then sometime just before that interview, he started talking with the family about some of his experiences. But yeah, that was, he had always been interested in World War II, and he stayed connected with his 94th Division and their reunions and his war buddies. And he just glowed at the prospect of coming to the Jackson Center and being interviewed for that. That was a real highlight in his life, I think.
Well, for us, it was a great story, and of course there's a little bit of an Allegheny College connection in all of that, and a Detroit Tigers connection, and to really peel back the onion, if you will, to see a period of his life which he was very proud.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Phi Delta connection too.
Excuse me.
Come on.
Most importantly. Golly. So at some point, Deke, you were on a periphery and supportive of Jamestown High School activities at the Jackson Center, but you actually got involved on a much deeper basis.
Oh yeah.
How did that all happen?
Retirement, Tom Schmidt made that happen. I think I was 4 or 5 years into my retirement, and Tom gave me a call, asked me to consider it, and we had worked together on and off through our whole careers. In fact, we both started as first grade teachers in our respective school districts way back when. So anyway, he called and asked, and I thought about it and talked to Deb and a couple of others, and agreed to come on as interim executive director at the Jackson Center for 3 months. That was particularly interesting because before I took the job, I explained to board chair Stan Lundeen that I had a 3-month window and it had a fixed end to it, and he indicated that they could find and get on board the next permanent executive director in that 3 months. So I agreed. And then, sure enough, the search didn't pan out as expected, and with 2 weeks to go, roughly, Tom, who had become board chair, I think, at that point, didn't beg me, but he was very serious about his interest in having me stay on a little bit longer. But I knew I couldn't not take Debbie to Florida as planned, a year-long plan so I couldn't do it, and I could tell in his eyes that Tom was really, I think looking back, that he recognized that meant this responsibility was coming to him. And so it worked out. I left and Tom came on. I think he was there a year, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And then Kristen came, and then, but you were dropped into the middle of a situation where we had construction going on.
Yeah, that was just the beginning of that project design. The grant had been awarded. Susan, I think, should take lots of credit for that. And here we go.
So we're talking about construction. Susan Murphy got the DRI, then all of a sudden plans, and really you are back to where your roots are, Jamestown Public Schools, construction.
Yeah. So working through that, I did lean on my prior history in that world, and was lucky enough to land Tim Brunswick in the Clerk of the Works job early on anyway, and that was a relief because he had worked for us in the school district, and I knew that whoever you had as the clerk was the person that was going to make or break you, you know. And so I had confidence in him. And I also leaned pretty heavily on Sherry, the office manager over there. Turns out she had a career history in construction management. It was perfect. So away we went. Yeah, so.
You had, and now you've seen the end product. What's your impression?
It's awesome. It was casually disappointing that it couldn't involve the original scope of work as intended, but the work that was done is outstanding. I guess they have a couple things yet to wrap up. I forget what, but that entry is stunning, and people never see the HVAC change, but the heat and the air conditioning is second to none. It's really an impressive job that's been completed over there.
Yeah, when you think about from 20 years ago, the building and the condition it was in to where we are today, where it's not only handicap compliant, but the whole building now is HVAC
ready.
And for those who live through it, like yourself,
Yeah.
it can be pretty warm in the summer.
That's an old building. It's a majestic building,
Yeah.
really. It's a stunning location.
A long story behind that. So you were in the education business, and now you had a little bit of a taste of the Jackson Center, some of its programming, some of which you saw from afar, and then all of a sudden you saw behind the curtain. What's your sense of the Jackson Center generally, and maybe if you had to put a crystal ball 5 years from now?
Well, I don't know if this is the answer to your question, but this last year in politics, I don't know how many times I've heard talking heads refer to the rule of law. And when I hear that phrase, my mind jumps to Robert H. Jackson and his legacy, his history. This is not an answer to your question, but as I can't help but think that the crystal ball has some lighted avenue for the Jackson Center to pursue in connecting the rule of law with Robert H. Jackson's legacy, and how the center can take advantage of that. It takes a smarter man than me to figure that out, but that whole thing is compelling. So I don't know, the crystal ball into the future, the connection with education, post-secondary or the important challenge for all schools in America is to connect in a meaningful way the content and the processes they teach to the interest of the students. That connection is, there's so many kids that have been disengaged and don't see the relevance of what they're learning. And the Jackson Center opens a avenue for that connection to happen. So there's definitely a future, or a need, I should say, in that regard.
Between or among yourself, Jason, Debbie, through a variety of things at the Jackson Center, Rotary, there have been programs there, and you were in control of some of those programs, observe some of those programs. Do you have any that sort of jump out in your mind saying, Greg, boy, I remember this, or I met such and such a person, kind of a vignette, a highlight, something where you'd say, that was meaningful?
Well, I was witness to, I forget the name of the event, but some middle school kids, including my granddaughter, came to the Jackson Center for a contest. It wasn't a Jeopardy kind of thing, but it was some rapid fire answer to the, well, they were reviewing a book. And contestants from this team and that team, and the questions came, and they hit a buzzer and answered as best they could, and that was an exciting thing. It was something that the children had prepared for, needed to prepare for, in reading this book or 2 or 3 books. And I saw that through the eyes of my granddaughter, and she talk about making a connection or making a meaningful experience out of literacy endeavor. That was a great thing. Sorry, I should remember the name of it. Kresge'd kick me under the table right now.
Well, we're both under that time period, Deke.
Guilty.
The term is dotage, and I think we're there.
Yeah.
Well, you should continue to stay interested. I know that, and if nothing else, your son will keep you interested. But wasn't your other son also interested in history?
Yeah, Jake is a professor at University of Buffalo.
Okay.
International relations. He wrote his doctorate around civil wars and the effect of a third-party intervention. Mm-hmm. And he's traveled all over the world studying rebel fighters and civil wars, Nicaragua and Uganda. He's been all over the place. Wrote a book with 2 other authors. They met in Oslo to confer and coordinate. So yeah, he's a historian at the bottom of it, and is wicked smart and a great writer. I remember sitting with him at the dining room table. Jake was in Mr. Pritchard's English class and had to trying to polish up some of his writing way back when. But yeah, he's a history fan and spent hours not interviewing but talking to Doug, his grandfather, about World War II. And in fact, he was in Europe, I think, writing with his co-authors, and he made a point of traveling to one of the battle zones that Doug had been engaged in, and he tried to follow the path that his troop followed, and so he was very, very interested. In fact, we have a old photograph when Jake was like 9 or 10, sitting on the couch with Doug, talking about World War II. I mean, that's how far back it goes.
Okay.
And then we, I don't know, 40, 30 years later, took another picture, staged Doug right next to Jake, and Jake tried to have his head angled exactly the same way. So we've got those 2 images to cherish.
Where do you go to college?
He went to the University of Rochester.
Yeah.
Then got his first master's at George Washington University. Then he matriculated to UNC, Chapel Hill,
Okay.
where he got his doctorate. And then his first professorship was at Ole Miss, and finally to UB.
I knew there was something in the south there, and he was doing something with James Meredith, as I recall. Even just because University of Mississippi integration,
Yeah.
we had Meredith here. And I remember somehow Debbie connecting me to him and doing something way back when.
Yeah, I missed it.
I'll go slower. Well, this has been great. What's the question you expected I would ask you, Deke, when you were walking in today?
Well, I don't know. I thought maybe you'd be asking me about my short but meaningful relationships with some of the board members. Stan Lundeen, who's...
Sure, go ahead, shoot.
I don't know, he's just a quality guy, you know, I was happy to be in attendance when the, what do you call that thing? His commemoration at the, that was, and working with Cameron Hurst on that stuff, that was, he's just a quality guy, made all the right decisions for all the right reasons, you know, just a stand-up guy. So I enjoyed working with him as much as I did. I also enjoyed working with, he kind of saved my life there, Rob Coker.
Yeah, Coker, sure.
The treasurer. It comes audit time, and thank God for Rob,
Yeah.
from my perspective. So yeah, so I guess the board connections were meaningful, and I enjoyed working with the staff at the center. Though I did have a surprise, the communications person 2 weeks in announced her intent to resign, and then another person that saved my life was Carol Drake coming back in.
Mm-hmm.
She also saved my life, so
Yeah.
those two people. And I had a great outgoing or incoming relationship with Susan, and Sherry is the salt of the earth over there, so there's some good people over there.
Well, and you cemented it during a crucial period of time.
I don't know. I kept the ship afloat, I guess you could say, but I was out of my element in a lot of ways, but not with the construction thing or the human relations thing, be it the board or with the staff members. So, you know, I did what I could, and it was a brief period of time, but it was also a learning time for me.
Well, learning for us too, and you did provide a critical service, because the construction part, we didn't know Sherry's talent at the time, was incredibly important, because that was rolling along, and we had to make sure that continued on, because there was a time frame.
Yeah, it was, it's always a sticky wicket, you know, lots of things you don't expect and things you have to account for, you know, be it personnel or backlogs or design, redesign. It's I could see why Ray Fasciano had that be the theme of his. That's where I learned whatever I learned about construction, was working with Ray. Millions and millions of dollars of new construction and remodeling done in the school district. So.
Well, thank you. This is fabulous.
Fabulous, huh? Great.
Yeah.